In the 1950s, seniors living alone knew how to make dinners from scratch that mattered. Their work in the kitchen didn't just boil vegetables. They made liver and onions and homemade beef stew from scratch that brought warmth to every meal. Then convenience food arrived, and these treasured dinners vanished. Let's rediscover 30 forgotten from-scratch dinners before they're lost forever. It was one of the cheapest dinners a senior could make, costing less than 50 cents and ready in 30 minutes. Grandma soaked thin sliced beef liver in milk for 10 minutes to remove bitterness. She peeled and quartered 3 potatoes and boiled them until tender. She drained the liver, patted it dry, and dredged each piece in seasoned flour. In a hot skillet, she melted 2 tablespoons of butter, added 1 sliced onion, and cooked it until golden. She pushed the onions aside, laid the liver in the skillet, and fried it 2 minutes per side until browned. The rich liver paired perfectly with sweet onions and buttery potatoes. Seniors soaked potatoes in pan drippings. Some added vinegar to the onions or served it with applesauce. The meal disappeared by the 1980s when liver became unpopular. Back then, it was the ultimate budget dinner, filling, nutritious, ready fast. It was the ultimate one-pot comfort meal, on feeding seniors for days from one batch costing under $2. Grandma cut 1 pound of cheap beef chuck into bite-sized cubes. She heated a heavy pot with a tablespoon of lard, browned the beef on all sides, then added 1 chopped onion and cooked until soft. She peeled and cubed 3 potatoes and 3 carrots, added them to the pot, covered everything with water, and seasoned with salt and pepper. The pot simmered on low heat for 2 to 3 hours until beef was tender and vegetables soft. Long cooking broke down tough meat and released vegetable sweetness into the broth. Seniors ate half for dinner and saved the rest for tomorrow. Some added bay leaf or thyme. The meal disappeared when canned soup and frozen dinners took over. Back then, it was patient cooking, cheap, honest, worth the wait. It was a complete meal cooked in one pot, costing under $1 and feeding a senior for 2 days. Grandma cut 1 fresh chicken into pieces, legs, thighs, breasts. She heated a deep skillet with butter, browned the chicken on both sides, then removed it. She added 1 chopped onion, 2 diced celery stalks, and 1 diced carrot, cooking until soft. She returned the chicken, added 1 cup uncooked white rice, poured in water to cover everything, and seasoned with salt and pepper. The pot simmered 45 minutes until rice absorbed chicken flavor and vegetables softened. Chicken stayed moist, rice was fluffy, vegetables added color. Seniors ate half and saved the rest. Some added bay leaf. The meal disappeared when boxed rice mixes and rotisserie chicken took over. Back then, it was simple wisdom. Fresh ingredients, 1 pot, no waste. Before we move on, many of you asked in the comments where to find these recipes. We even received tons of email too, so we published these recipes on our website. The link is in the description. Let's continue. It was a hearty 1-pan dinner costing less than $1, and ready in 25 minutes with minimal cleanup. Grandma sliced fresh pork sausage links into thick rounds. She heated a cast-iron skillet over medium heat, browned the sausage on both sides, then removed it to a plate. She added 1 small head of cabbage, cored and sliced thin, along with 1 sliced onion to the hot skillet. She poured in a 1/4 cup of water, covered the skillet tightly, and cooked for 15 minutes until the cabbage wilted and sweetened. She returned the browned sausage, stirred everything together, and let it cook uncovered for 5 more minutes. The sausage fat flavored the cabbage, and the onions caramelized into the mix. Seniors ate it hot with buttered bread. Some added caraway seeds or vinegar for tang. The meal disappeared when frozen skillet dinners took over. Back then, it was quick, filling, and made in one pan. It was one of the most popular Depression-era dinners, costing about 30 cents and ready in 20 minutes using one skillet and one pot. Grandma bought a single bone-in pork chop, the cheapest cut available. She peeled and quartered 3 potatoes and boiled them in salted water until tender. She seasoned the pork chop with salt and pepper, dredged it in flour, and heated a tablespoon of lard in a cast-iron skillet over medium-high heat. She fried the chop 4 minutes per side until golden and crispy. She removed the chop and added flour to the pan drippings, stirred in half a cup of water, and made simple gravy. She drained the potatoes, topped them with hot gravy, and served them alongside the pork chop. Some added sage or thyme to the gravy. The meal disappeared when pre-seasoned pork chops and instant potatoes took over. Back then, it was simple. 1 chop, 1 skillet, done. These 5 dinners, liver and onions, beef stew, chicken and rice, cabbage and sausage, and pan-fried pork chop, were once the backbone of survival for seniors living alone. Today they've been replaced by canned soups, frozen dinners, and takeout, and the simple skills to cook fresh, cheap meals from scratch have vanished. It was a weekly staple costing pennies and feeding a senior for 3 or 4 days from one large pot. Grandma chopped 2 carrots, 2 celery stalks, 1 onion, and 3 potatoes into small, even pieces. She heated a large pot with a tablespoon of butter, added the chopped vegetables, and cooked them for 5 minutes until softened. She covered everything with water, added salt, pepper, and a bay leaf, and simmered the soup for 1 hour until the vegetables were tender. Some added a leftover ham bone or chicken bones for extra flavor. The soup cost almost nothing and used up every scrap of fresh produce. Seniors ate a bowl for lunch and dinner, and the soup tasted better each day. Some added a handful of dried beans or barley for thickness. The meal disappeared when canned soup and instant ramen took over. Back then, it was simple wisdom: fresh vegetables, water, and time-made nourishment. It was a creamy, comforting soup costing less than 50 cents and ready in 40 minutes using 1 pot. Grandma sliced the white and light green parts of 2 fresh leeks into thin rings and rinsed them thoroughly to remove dirt. She heated a pot with 2 tablespoons of butter, added the leeks, and cooked them 5 minutes until soft and sweet. She peeled and diced 3 potatoes, added them to the pot, covered everything with water, and seasoned with salt and pepper. The soup simmered 25 minutes until the potatoes were tender. She mashed some of the potatoes against the side of the pot to thicken the soup naturally. She stirred in a splash of milk for richness. Seniors ate it hot with buttered bread. Some added chopped fresh parsley. The meal disappeared when instant soup mixes took over. Back then, it was simple cooking. 2 fresh ingredients, butter, and patience made comfort. It was a thrifty breakfast for dinner favorite costing almost nothing and ready in 15 minutes using 1 cast-iron skillet. Grandma saved leftover boiled or baked potatoes from earlier meals and diced them into small, even cubes. She heated a skillet with 2 tablespoons of bacon, fat, or butter over medium-high heat. She added the diced potatoes and 1 diced fresh onion to the hot skillet and cooked them, stirring occasionally, until the potatoes were crispy and golden and the onions were caramelized. About 10 minutes. She cracked an egg directly into the center of the hash and fried it until the whites were set, but the yolk was still runny. The runny yolk became the sauce for the crispy hash. And some added leftover cooked meat or fresh herbs. The meal disappeared when frozen hash browns and microwave meals took over. Back then, it was smart cooking. Leftovers, fresh onions, and one skillet turned nothing into dinner. It was a classic Southern one-pot meal costing under $1 and feeding a senior for 2 days from one large pot. Grandma snapped the ends off 1 pound of fresh green beans and cut them into bite-sized pieces. She chopped 3 bacon slices into small pieces and fried them in a large pot until crispy. She removed the bacon, left the fat in the pot, and added the green beans, 3 quartered potatoes, salt, and pepper. She poured in enough water to cover everything and brought it to a boil. She reduced the heat, covered the pot tightly, and simmered 1 hour until the beans were tender and the potatoes were soft. She stirred the crispy bacon back in before serving. The bacon fat flavored everything. Some added a pinch of sugar or a splash of vinegar. The meal disappeared when canned green beans took over. Back then, it was patient cooking. Fresh vegetables, bacon, and thyme made a complete meal. It was a Depression-era sheet pan dinner, costing under $1 and feeding a senior for 3 days with minimal cleanup. Grandma shaped a small meatloaf from 1 pound of fresh ground beef, 1 egg, half a cup of breadcrumbs, 1 diced onion, salt, and pepper. She placed it on a greased baking sheet and arranged fresh vegetables, 3 quartered potatoes, 2 chopped carrots, 1 sliced onion, around the meatloaf. She drizzled everything with a little melted fat and seasoned the vegetables with salt and pepper. The pan baked at 350 degrees for 45 minutes until the meatloaf was cooked through and the vegetables were tender and golden. The vegetables roasted in the meatloaf's drippings and absorbed all the flavor. Seniors ate half for dinner and sliced the cold meatloaf for sandwiches the next day. Some added ketchup on top. The meal disappeared when frozen dinners took over. Back then it was smart cooking, 1 pan, fresh ingredients, 3 meals. It was one of the cheapest, most filling dinners a senior living alone could make, costing less than 50 cents and ready in 30 minutes using 1 skillet and 1 pot. Grandma bought a 1/4 pound of fresh ground beef from the butcher, the cheapest meat available. She shaped it into a thick patty, seasoned it with salt and pepper, and heated a tablespoon of lard in a cast-iron skillet over medium-high heat. She placed the patty in the hot skillet and fried it 4 minutes per side until browned and cooked through. While the patty cooked, she peeled and cubed 3 turnips and boiled them in salted water until tender, about 20 minutes. She drained the turnips, mashed them with a fork, and stirred in a tablespoon of butter and a splash of milk. The mashed turnips were slightly sweet, earthy, and lighter than potatoes. She removed the beef patty from the skillet, added a tablespoon of flour to the drippings, stirred in half a cup of water, and made a simple pan gravy. She served the beef patty over the mashed turnips and poured the hot gravy over everything. Some grandmas added a pinch of black pepper or a dash of vinegar to the turnips for brightness. The meal was filling, nourishing, and used ingredients that cost almost nothing. Turnips were cheaper than potatoes in many regions and stored well through winter. The meal disappeared by the 1970s when turnips fell out of favor and ground beef became too expensive for daily meals. Back then, it was honest cooking. 1 patty, 1 vegetable, simple gravy, and nothing wasted. It was a quick, hearty, 1-pan dinner costing under $1 and ready in 20 minutes with almost no cleanup. Grandma bought fresh pork sausage links, the cheapest protein at the butcher shop. She heated a cast-iron skillet over medium heat, placed the sausages in the dry pan, and browned them slowly on all sides for about 10 minutes, turning occasionally until golden and cooked through. She removed the sausages to a plate, left the fat in the skillet, and then added 2 cups of fresh or jarred sauerkraut, drained slightly but not rinsed. She stirred the sauerkraut in the sausage fat for 5 minutes until heated through and slightly caramelized. She returned the sausages to the skillet, nestled them into the sauerkraut, covered the pan, and let everything cook together for 5 more minutes so the flavors melded. The sausage fat flavored the tangy sauerkraut, and the sauerkraut kept the sausages moist. Our seniors ate it hot with a slice of buttered rye bread or boiled potatoes on the side. Some added caraway seeds, a sliced apple, or a splash of beer to the sauerkraut for extra depth. The meal was filling, flavorful, and required only 1 pan and a few minutes of attention. Sauerkraut was cheap, shelf-stable, and packed with probiotics that supported digestion. The meal disappeared when pre-cooked sausages and canned sauerkraut became the norm, and fresh sausage links became harder to find. Back then, it was simple wisdom. 2 ingredients, 1 pan, 10 minutes, and dinner was done. It was one of the cheapest, most nourishing soups a senior could make, costing less than 50 cents and feeding them for 4 or 5 days from one pot. Grandma started with 1 cup of dried brown or green lentils, rinsed and picked over for stones. She heated a large pot with a tablespoon of butter or bacon fat, added 1 diced onion and 2 diced carrots, and cooked them for 5 minutes until softened. She added the lentils, covered everything with 6 cups of water, and seasoned with salt, pepper, and a bay leaf. The pot simmered on low heat for 45 minutes until the lentils were tender and the soup thickened naturally. Some grandmas added 1 diced potato, a handful of chopped celery, or a leftover ham bone for extra flavor. The soup was thick, hearty, and protein-rich without any meat. Lentils were one of the cheapest sources of protein available during the Depression and required no soaking like dried beans. Seniors ate a bowl for lunch and dinner, and the soup tasted better each day as the flavors deepened. Some added a splash of vinegar or a squeeze of lemon juice before serving for brightness. The meal disappeared when instant soup mixes and canned lentil soup became widely available in the 1960s. Back then, it was patient cooking. Dried lentils, fresh vegetables, water, and thyme made a complete, satisfying meal that cost almost nothing and nourished for days. It was a simple, comforting soup that cost pennies and was ready in 10 minutes using 1 pot and 2 ingredients. Grandma started with 4 cups of homemade chicken or vegetable broth, saved from earlier meals or made by simmering chicken bones, vegetable scraps, and water. She brought the broth to a gentle boil in a pot, unseasoned it with salt and a pinch of white pepper, and stirred in a teaspoon of cornstarch mixed with water to thicken it slightly. She cracked 2 fresh eggs into a small bowl and beat them lightly with a fork. She stirred the boiling broth in one direction to create a gentle whirlpool, then slowly drizzled the beaten eggs into the moving broth in a thin stream. The eggs cooked instantly, forming delicate, silky ribbons throughout the soup. She turned off the heat, stirred once more, and served the soup hot. Some grandmas added a handful of chopped green onions, a drizzle of sesame oil, or a few frozen peas for color and flavor. The soup was light, nourishing, and gentle on the stomach, perfect for seniors who didn't feel like eating heavy meals. It used up leftover broth and provided protein from the eggs. The meal disappeared when canned broths and instant soup packets became the standard, and making broth from scratch fell out of practice. Back then, it was simple wisdom: homemade broth, fresh eggs, 5 minutes, and you had a warm, satisfying bowl of soup that cost almost nothing and warmed you from the inside out. It was a simple, satisfying skillet dinner that cost less than 50 cents and was ready in 25 minutes using one pan. Grandma started by chopping 3 slices of bacon into small pieces and frying them in a cast-iron skillet over medium heat until crispy. She removed the bacon to a plate and left the fat in the skillet. She peeled and sliced 3 potatoes into thin rounds, about a 1/4 inch thick, and added them to the hot bacon fat. She sliced 1 onion and added it to the skillet, stirring everything together. She cooked the potatoes and onions over medium heat, stirring occasionally for 15 to 20 minutes until the potatoes were golden, crispy on the edges, and tender inside, and the onions were caramelized and sweet. She stirred the crispy bacon back into the skillet just before serving and seasoned everything with salt and pepper. Some grandmas added a pinch of paprika or a handful of chopped fresh parsley. The meal was crispy, savory, and incredibly satisfying. Starch, fat, and a little meat all cooked together in one pan. Seniors ate it as a main dish with a slice of bread or a fried egg on top. The potatoes soaked up the bacon fat, and every bite was flavorful. The meal disappeared when frozen hash browns and pre-cooked bacon became widely available in the 1970s. Back then, it was smart cooking: potatoes, onions, bacon, one skillet, and nothing wasted. These 5 dinners, ground beef patty with turnips, sausage with sauerkraut, lentil soup, egg drop soup, and pan-fried potatoes with bacon, were staples for seniors living alone in the 1940s to 60s. Today, they've been replaced by frozen meals, instant soups, and pre-cooked ingredients, and the skills to cook fresh, cheap meals from scratch have vanished. It was a complete sheet pan dinner that cost under $2 and fed a senior for 2 or 3 days with minimal cleanup. Grandma bought 2 chicken thighs or drumsticks, the cheapest cuts available. She placed them on a greased baking sheet and arranged fresh vegetables around them: 3 quartered potatoes, 2 chopped carrots, 1 sliced onion, and a handful of green beans if they were in season. She drizzled everything with a tablespoon of melted butter or bacon fat, seasoned with salt, pepper, and a pinch of dried thyme or rosemary, and made sure every piece was coated. The pan went into a 350-degree oven and baked for 45 minutes until the chicken skin was golden and crispy. The meat was cooked through, and the vegetables were tender and caramelized. The vegetables roasted in the chicken's drippings, absorbing all the rich, savory flavor. Seniors ate half for dinner and saved the rest for the next day. Cold chicken and roasted vegetables made excellent leftovers. Some grandmas added a splash of lemon juice or a sprinkle of garlic powder before baking. The meal was balanced, flavorful, and required no stovetop cooking or multiple pans. It disappeared when rotisserie chickens and frozen vegetable medleys became widely available in the 1980s. Back then, it was patient cooking: fresh chicken, fresh vegetables, one pan, 45 minutes, and you had a complete, nourishing meal that tasted like Sunday dinner but cost almost nothing. It was a simple, satisfying vegetarian dinner that cost less than 50 cents and was ready in 1 hour using one oven and one skillet. Grandma scrubbed 1 large russet potato, poked it several times with a fork, rubbed the skin with a little butter or oil, and placed it directly on the oven rack at 400 degrees. She baked it for 50 to 60 minutes until the skin was crispy and the inside was fluffy and tender. While the potato baked, she sliced 1 small onion and a handful of fresh mushrooms. White button mushrooms were the cheapest and most common. She heated a skillet with a tablespoon of butter over medium heat, added the onions, and cooked them for 5 minutes until soft and golden. She added the sliced mushrooms, and seasoned with salt and pepper and cooked for another 5 to 7 minutes until the mushrooms released their moisture and browned slightly. When the potato was done, she split it open, fluffed the inside with a fork, and topped it with the hot sautéed mushrooms and onions. The buttery mushrooms and sweet caramelized onions soaked into the fluffy potato. Some grandmas added a dollop of sour cream or a sprinkle of fresh parsley. The meal was filling, flavorful, and used simple, affordable ingredients. Potatoes were cheap and stored well, and mushrooms were an inexpensive way to add depth and richness without meat. The meal disappeared when baked potato bars and pre-topped frozen potatoes became popular in the 1990s. Back then, it was simple wisdom. One potato, a few mushrooms, butter, and patience made a satisfying dinner. It was a simple, nourishing dinner that cost less than 50 cents and was ready in 30 minutes using one pot and one skillet. Grandma peeled and quartered 4 potatoes and boiled them in salted water for 20 minutes until tender. While the potatoes cooked, she washed and chopped a bunch of fresh greens, collard greens, mustard greens, turnip greens, or spinach, whatever was cheapest at the market or growing in the garden. She heated a skillet with a tablespoon of bacon fat or butter over medium heat. She added the chopped greens and cooked them for 5 to 7 minutes until wilted and tender. She seasoned them with salt, pepper, and a splash of vinegar. She drained the potatoes, mashed them with a fork or potato masher, and stirred in a tablespoon of butter and a splash of milk until smooth and creamy. She served a mound of hot mashed potatoes topped with the sautéed greens and the greens' flavorful juices soaked into the potatoes. Some grandmas added a pinch of garlic powder to the greens or a sprinkle of black pepper on top. The meal was filling, balanced, and provided carbohydrates from the potatoes and vitamins and minerals from the fresh greens. Greens were extremely cheap, often just pennies a bunch, and grew abundantly in southern gardens. The meal disappeared when instant mashed potatoes and frozen greens became the standard in the 1970s. Back then, it was honest cooking. Fresh potatoes, fresh greens, butter, and a little time made a complete, satisfying meal that nourished body and soul. It was a quick, one-pan dinner that cost under $1 and was ready in 25 minutes with minimal cleanup. Grandma bought half a pound of fresh ground beef, the cheapest meat available. She heated a cast-iron skillet over medium-high heat, added the ground beef, and cooked it, breaking it apart with a wooden spoon until browned and crumbled. She drained off any excess fat, leaving just enough to flavor the vegetables. She added 1 diced onion, 2 diced carrots, and 2 diced celery stalks to the skillet and cooked them for 5 minutes until softened. She added 1 diced potato, half a cup of water, salt, pepper, and a bay leaf, covered the skillet, and let everything simmer for 15 minutes until the potato was tender and the flavors melded together. The result was a savory, hearty skillet meal with protein, vegetables, and starch all in one pan. Some grandmas added a splash of Worcestershire sauce or a pinch of dried thyme for extra flavor. Seniors ate it hot, sometimes with a slice of buttered bread to soak up the juices. The meal was filling, balanced, and required only 1 pan and a few simple ingredients. It used up whatever vegetables were on hand and stretched a small amount of ground beef into a complete dinner. The meal disappeared when boxed hamburger helpers and frozen skillet meals became popular in the 1970s. Back then, it was smart cooking: ground beef, fresh vegetables, 1 skillet, and you had dinner in 20 minutes. It was a thrifty, flavorful dinner that cost less than 50 cents and was ready in 15 minutes using leftover rice and 1 skillet. Grandma saved leftover cooked white rice from earlier meals. Day-old rice worked best because it was drier and fried better. She heated a cast-iron skillet or wok with a tablespoon of oil over high heat. She added 1 diced onion, 1 diced carrot, and a handful of frozen or fresh peas and cooked them quickly, stirring constantly, for 3 to 4 minutes until tender. She pushed the vegetables to the side, cracked 1 egg into the center of the skillet, and scrambled it until just cooked. She added the cold leftover rice to the skillet, broke up any clumps, and stirred everything together, frying the rice for 5 to 7 minutes until heated through and slightly crispy on the edges. She seasoned with salt, pepper, and a splash of soy sauce if she had it. Some grandmas added leftover cooked meat, chopped green onions, or a drizzle of sesame oil. The meal was savory, satisfying, and used up leftovers that would otherwise go to waste. Fried rice was a staple in Chinese-American households and became popular in mainstream American kitchens during the 1950s and 60s. The meal disappeared when instant rice and frozen fried rice became widely available. Back then, it was smart cooking: leftover rice, a few vegetables, 1 egg, high heat, and you had a complete, flavorful dinner in minutes that cost almost nothing. It was one of the most economical and satisfying dinners a senior living alone could make, costing under $2 and providing 2 or 3 meals from 1 baking pan. Grandma bought 2 chicken thighs, bone-in and skin-on, which were the cheapest, most flavorful cuts available at the butcher. She placed them on a greased baking sheet and arranged a variety of root vegetables around them: 2 peeled and quartered potatoes, on 2 peeled and chunked carrots, 1 peeled and cubed turnip, and 1 peeled and sliced parsnip if it was in season. She drizzled everything with a tablespoon of melted butter or bacon fat, rubbed the chicken skin with salt, pepper, and a pinch of dried rosemary or thyme, and made sure every vegetable piece was coated and seasoned. The pan went into a 375-degree oven and roasted for 50 to 60 minutes until the chicken skin was golden, crispy, and crackling. The meat was cooked through and tender, and the vegetables were caramelized and soft. The root vegetables roasted in the chicken's drippings, absorbing all the rich, savory fat and becoming sweet and deeply flavorful. Seniors ate 1 chicken thigh and half the vegetables for dinner and saved the second thigh and remaining vegetables for lunch or dinner the next day. Some grandmas added a splash of lemon juice before serving or sprinkled fresh parsley over the top. The meal was balanced, nourishing, and required no stovetop cooking or multiple pans, just 1 sheet pan and the oven. Root vegetables were extremely cheap, especially in fall and winter when they were harvested and stored in bulk. Potatoes, carrots, turnips, and parsnips could be kept in a cool cellar for months without spoiling. The meal disappeared when rotisserie chickens, pre-cut vegetables, and frozen vegetable medleys became widely available in supermarkets in the 1980s and 90s. Today's seniors buy pre-roasted chicken and steam-in-bag vegetables, and the patient art of roasting fresh chicken and root vegetables together in 1 pan has been completely forgotten. Back then, it was honest cooking: 2 chicken thighs, a handful of root vegetables, butter, herbs, 1 hour in the oven, and you had a complete restaurant-quality meal that cost less than $2 and tasted like Sunday dinner every time. It was the kind of meal that filled your kitchen with warmth and aroma and reminded you that simple ingredients cooked with patience and care could create something truly special. It was a simple, light, and affordable dinner that cost under $1 and was ready in 20 minutes using 1 skillet and 1 pot. Grandma bought a small piece of fresh cod or haddock. White fish was often the cheapest seafood available, especially on Fridays when fish markets discounted it for Catholic customers observing Meatless Fridays. She patted the fish dry with a towel, seasoned it generously with salt and pepper, and dredged it lightly in flour. She heated a tablespoon of butter in a cast-iron skillet over medium-high heat until it foamed, then carefully placed the fish in the hot skillet, skin side down if it had skin. She cooked the fish for 3 to 4 minutes without moving it, allowing a golden crust to form, then flipped it gently and cooked the other side for another 3 to 4 minutes until the fish was opaque, flaky, and cooked through. She drained the cabbage, tossed it with a tablespoon of butter, and seasoned it with salt and pepper. She served the pan-seared fish on top of the steamed cabbage, and the buttery fish juices soaked into the tender cabbage. Some grandmas added a squeeze of fresh lemon juice over the fish, or a sprinkle of fresh dill or parsley. The meal was light, healthy, and incredibly flavorful despite its simplicity. Fish provided lean protein, and cabbage was one of the cheapest vegetables available year-round. The combination was popular in coastal communities and immigrant households, especially German, Irish, and Scandinavian families. The meal disappeared when frozen fish fillets and pre-cut coleslaw mix became the standard in the 1970s and 80s. Today's seniors buy breaded frozen fish and bag salad, and the simple skill of pan-searing fresh fish and steaming fresh cabbage has been lost. Back then, it was elegant cooking, fresh fish, fresh cabbage, butter, 20 minutes, and you had a light, healthy, delicious dinner that cost less than $1 and felt special every time. It was the kind of meal that proved you didn't need expensive ingredients or complicated techniques to create something truly delicious and satisfying. It was one of the simplest, most foolproof dinners a senior could make, costing less than $1 and ready in 45 minutes with almost no effort. Grandma bought 1 or 2 chicken drumsticks, the absolute cheapest cut of chicken available. She placed them on a small greased baking dish or cast-iron skillet and arranged 3 or 4 peeled and halved carrots around them. She rubbed the chicken skin with a little softened butter, seasoned everything generously with salt, pepper, and a pinch of dried thyme or paprika, and made sure the carrots were coated in the butter and seasonings. The dish went into a 375-degree oven and baked for 40 to 45 minutes until the chicken skin was golden and crispy. The meat was cooked through and fell off the bone, and the carrots were tender and caramelized on the edges. The carrots roasted in the chicken's drippings, becoming sweet, rich, and incredibly flavorful. Seniors ate 1 chicken leg and half the carrots for dinner and saved the rest for the next day. Cold roasted chicken and carrots made an excellent lunch. Some grandmas added a drizzle of honey over the carrots before baking or sprinkled fresh parsley on top before serving. The meal was balanced, nourishing, and required no stovetop cooking, no multiple pans, and no complicated techniques, just chicken, carrots, butter, and heat. Chicken legs were sold individually or in bulk for pennies, and carrots were one of the cheapest, longest-lasting vegetables available. The meal disappeared when rotisserie chickens and pre-cut baby carrots became the norm in the 1990s. Today's seniors buy pre-cooked chicken and steam-in-bag carrots, and the simple art of roasting fresh chicken legs and whole carrots together has been forgotten. Back then, it was patient cooking, 1 chicken leg, a few carrots, butter, 45 minutes in the oven, and you had a complete, satisfying, home-cooked meal that cost less than $1 and tasted better than anything from a restaurant. It was the kind of meal that reminded you that good food didn't require fancy ingredients or complicated steps, just simple, honest cooking with a little time and care. It was a delicate, flavorful dinner that cost under $1 and was ready in 15 minutes using 1 skillet. Grandma bought a small whole trout, cleaned and gutted from the fish market, or caught it fresh from a local stream or lake. Freshwater trout was cheap and plentiful, especially in rural areas. She patted the fish dry inside and out with a towel, seasoned it generously with salt and pepper inside the cavity and on both sides, and dredged it lightly in flour. She heated 2 tablespoons of butter in a cast-iron skillet over medium-high heat until it foamed and started to brown slightly. She carefully placed the whole trout in the hot skillet and cooked it for 4 to 5 minutes without moving it, allowing a golden, crispy crust to form on the skin. She flipped the fish gently with a spatula and cooked the other side for another 4 to 5 minutes until the skin was crispy, the flesh was opaque and flaky, and the fish was cooked through. She squeezed fresh lemon juice over the fish, spooned the browned butter from the pan over the top, and served it immediately. Some grandmas added a sprinkle of fresh parsley or a few capers if they had them. The meal was light, elegant, and incredibly flavorful. The crispy skin, the tender, flaky fish, the nutty browned butter and the bright lemon juice all worked together perfectly. Seniors ate the fish with boiled potatoes or steamed greens on the side. The meal was popular in rural areas where trout was abundant and cheap, and in immigrant households where whole fish was preferred over fillets. The meal disappeared when frozen fish fillets and pre-breaded fish sticks became the standard in the 1970s. It was one of the quickest, cheapest, most satisfying dinners a senior could make, costing less than 25 cents and ready in 10 minutes using 1 skillet and 1 toaster. Grandma heated a tablespoon of butter in a cast-iron skillet over medium heat until it melted and foamed. She cracked 2 fresh eggs directly into the hot skillet, seasoned them with salt and pepper, and cooked them gently, either sunny side up with runny yolks, over easy by flipping them once, or scrambled by stirring them constantly. While the eggs cooked, she toasted 2 slices of bread, white, wheat, or rye, and buttered them generously while they were still hot. She washed and chopped a handful of fresh greens, spinach, mustard greens, or dandelion greens, and wilted them quickly in the same skillet after removing the eggs, using the remaining butter and adding a splash of water if needed. She served the fried eggs on top of the buttered toast, with the wilted greens on the side, and the runny yolks became the sauce for everything. Some grandmas added a dash of hot sauce or a sprinkle of black pepper on top. The meal was simple, satisfying, and packed with protein and nutrients. Eggs were one of the cheapest proteins available during the Depression, often just a few cents each, and greens were abundant and free if you knew where to forage. The combination of crispy buttered toast, rich runny eggs, and tender greens was comforting and filling. The meal was popular as breakfast for dinner, especially when money was tight or the pantry was nearly empty. It disappeared when breakfast became a strictly morning meal and frozen breakfast sandwiches became popular in the 1980s. Today's seniors buy egg sandwiches from fast food or microwave frozen ones, and the simple art of frying fresh eggs and wilting fresh greens has been forgotten. Back then, it was survival cooking. 2 eggs, 2 slices of bread, a handful of greens, 10 minutes, and you had a complete meal that nourished body and soul. These 5 dinners, roasted chicken thigh with root vegetables, pan-seared cod with cabbage, baked chicken leg with carrots, pan-fried trout with lemon, and fried eggs with greens, were daily staples for seniors living alone. Today they've been replaced by rotisserie chicken, frozen fish, and fast food, and the skills to cook fresh, simple meals have vanished completely. It was one of the quickest, healthiest, and most affordable dinners a senior living alone could make, costing less than 30 cents, and ready in under 10 minutes using 1 skillet and 1 toaster. Grandma started by washing a large handful of fresh spinach leaves, or a small bunch if she bought it at the market, and chopping them roughly. She heated a tablespoon of butter in a cast-iron skillet over medium heat until it melted and foamed. She added the chopped spinach to the hot skillet and cooked it for 2 to 3 minutes, stirring constantly until it wilted down and released its moisture. While the spinach cooked, she cracked 2 or 3 fresh eggs into a bowl, added a splash of milk, a pinch of salt and pepper, and beat them lightly with a fork until combined. She pushed the cooked spinach to the side of the skillet, added another small pat of butter to the center, and poured in the beaten eggs. She cooked the eggs gently, stirring slowly with a wooden spoon or spatula until they formed soft, creamy curds. She folded the wilted spinach into the scrambled eggs just before they finished cooking, so everything was mixed together. While the eggs cooked, she toasted 2 slices of bread, white, wheat, or rye, and buttered them generously while they were still hot, from the eggs and iron and vitamins from the fresh spinach. Spinach was cheap and abundant, especially in spring and summer when it grew quickly in gardens. Eggs were one of the most affordable proteins available, often costing just pennies each. The combination was popular among seniors because it was easy to digest, are quick to prepare, and required minimal ingredients and effort. The meal disappeared when bagged pre-washed spinach and frozen egg products became the norm in the 1980s and 90s. Today's seniors buy liquid egg whites in cartons and microwave frozen breakfast sandwiches, and the simple skill of scrambling fresh eggs with fresh spinach has been lost. Back then, it was honest cooking. A handful of spinach, a few eggs, butter, toast, 10 minutes, and you had a complete, healthy, satisfying meal that cost almost nothing. It was the kind of dinner that warmed you, nourished you, and reminded you that simple food made with care was always enough. It was one of the simplest, most comforting dinners a senior could make, costing less than 50 cents and ready in 15 minutes using 1 pot. Grandma bought a small package of dried egg noodles, wide, flat noodles that were cheap and sold in bulk. She brought a large pot of salted water to a boil, added the noodles, and cooked them according to the package directions, usually 8 to 10 minutes, until they were tender but still had a slight bite. While the noodles cooked, she chopped a small handful of fresh herbs, parsley, dill, chives, or a combination, whatever was growing in the garden or cheapest at the market. She drained the cooked noodles in a colander, returned them to the hot pot, and immediately tossed them with 2 or 3 tablespoons of butter, stirring until the butter melted and coated every strand. She added the chopped fresh herbs, a generous pinch of salt, and a few grinds of black pepper, and tossed everything together until fragrant and well combined. She served the buttery noodles hot in a bowl, sometimes with a sprinkle of grated Parmesan cheese on top if she had it. Some grandmas added a splash of the pasta cooking water to make the sauce silkier, or stirred in a spoonful of sour cream for extra richness. The meal was simple, satisfying, and incredibly flavorful despite having just a few ingredients. The butter coated the noodles and made them rich and silky, and the fresh herbs added brightness and a burst of flavor. Egg noodles were filling and comforting, and the dish felt like a hug in a bowl. Seniors ate it as a main dish when they didn't have meat or vegetables on hand, or served it as a side dish alongside roasted chicken or pot roast. The meal was popular in German, Hungarian, and Eastern European immigrant households where egg noodles were a staple. It disappeared when boxed pasta mixes with powdered sauce packets became popular in the 1970s and 80s. Today's seniors buy pasta sides in a box or frozen pasta dishes, and the simple art of cooking fresh egg noodles with butter and herbs has been forgotten. Back then, it was humble cooking: dried noodles, butter, fresh herbs, 15 minutes, and you had a warm, comforting, satisfying meal that cost almost nothing. It was the kind of dinner that didn't need to be fancy to be delicious, and it reminded you that sometimes the simplest foods are the most comforting and the most memorable. It was one of the most beloved, most comforting dinners a senior living alone could make, costing less than 50 cents and ready in 20 minutes using one pot. Grandma brought a large pot of salted water to a rolling boil and added 2 cups of dried elbow macaroni, the cheapest pasta shape available at any grocery store. She cooked the macaroni for 8 to 10 minutes, stirring occasionally to prevent sticking until it was tender but still had a little bite, what Italians call al dente. While the macaroni cooked, she grated a small block of sharp cheddar cheese, about 1 cup, using a box grater, making sure to use sharp cheddar because it had more flavor and melted better than mild cheese. She drained the cooked macaroni in a colander, shaking off the excess water but not rinsing it. Rinsing would wash away the starch that helped the cheese sauce stick, and returned it immediately to the hot pot while it was still steaming. She added 3 tablespoons of butter to the hot macaroni and stirred vigorously until the butter melted completely and coated every single piece of macaroni with a glossy sheen. She added the grated cheese a handful at a time, stirring constantly with a wooden spoon until the cheese melted into the hot macaroni and created a creamy, glossy sauce that clung to every piece. The heat from the macaroni was enough to melt the cheese without needing any additional cooking. She added a splash of milk, 2 to 3 tablespoons, to loosen the sauce and make it silkier and smoother, and seasoned with a pinch of salt, a few grinds of black pepper, and a tiny pinch of dry mustard powder if she had it, which added a subtle tang and depth of flavor. She served the macaroni and cheese hot in a bowl, sometimes with a sprinkle of extra grated cheese on top, or a few buttered breadcrumbs for crunch. Some grandmas added a beaten egg to the hot macaroni before adding the cheese, or whisking it in quickly so it didn't scramble, which made the sauce even richer, creamier, and more custard-like. The meal was rich, comforting, and incredibly satisfying, the kind of food that made you feel loved and cared for. The real cheddar cheese melted into the hot macaroni and created a smooth, flavorful sauce that coated every piece perfectly. It was nothing like the powdered cheese packets that came later. This was real cheese, real butter, real comfort food made from scratch. Macaroni and cheese was a staple in American kitchens from the Depression through the 1960s, and it was especially popular among seniors because it was filling, affordable, easy to make, and required only a few simple ingredients. The meal disappeared when boxed macaroni and cheese with powdered cheese sauce became the standard convenience food in the 1970s. Today's seniors buy the blue box or frozen mac and cheese and microwave it in 3 minutes. And the simple skill of making real macaroni and cheese from scratch with butter and real grated cheese has been completely forgotten. Back then, it was soul food. Dried macaroni, butter, real cheese, 20 minutes, and you had a warm, creamy, comforting bowl of homemade macaroni and cheese that cost less than 50 cents and tasted like home every single time. It was the kind of meal that reminded you that comfort didn't come from a box. It came from simple ingredients cooked with care. It was one of the cheapest, most nourishing dinners a senior could make, costing less than 50 cents, and feeding them for 4 or 5 days from one pot. Grandma started with 1 pound of dried navy beans or pinto beans, rinsed thoroughly and picked over carefully for stones or debris. She soaked them overnight in a large bowl of water to soften them and reduce cooking time. The beans would swell and double in size by morning. In the morning, she drained the soaked beans, discarded the soaking water, placed them in a heavy pot or Dutch oven, and covered them with fresh water. She added 1 diced onion, 2 tablespoons of molasses or brown sugar for sweetness, 2 tablespoons of ketchup or tomato paste for tang and color, 1 tablespoon of yellow mustard for depth, 1 teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of black pepper. Some grandmas preferred to bake the beans in the oven at 300 degrees instead of simmering them on the stove, which gave them a deeper, more caramelized flavor and a slightly thicker sauce. The long, slow cooking allowed the flavors to meld together beautifully. The sweetness of the molasses, the tang of the tomato and mustard, the smokiness of the bacon, and the earthiness of the beans all combined into one rich, satisfying dish. The result was a pot of tender, flavorful beans in a sweet, smoky, tangy sauce that was incredibly comforting and filling. Seniors ate the beans hot with a thick slice of buttered bread or homemade cornbread to soak up the sauce. It was one of the freshest, most flavorful dinners, costing less than 30 cents and ready in 10 minutes using 1 skillet and 1 toaster. Grandma started by dicing 1 ripe tomato into small pieces. Fresh tomatoes were cheap and abundant in summer, or she used a canned tomato if it was winter. She heated a tablespoon of butter in a cast-iron skillet over medium heat until it melted and foamed. She added the diced tomato to the hot skillet and cooked it for 2 to 3 minutes, stirring occasionally until it softened and released its juices. The tomato broke down slightly, creating a light, fresh sauce in the bottom of the skillet. While the tomato cooked, she cracked 2 or 3 fresh eggs into a bowl, added a splash of milk, a pinch of salt and pepper, and beat them lightly with a fork until combined. She poured the beaten eggs into the skillet with the cooked tomato and stirred gently with a wooden spoon or spatula, cooking the eggs slowly over medium-low heat until they formed soft, creamy curds mixed with pieces of tender tomato. The key was cooking the eggs slowly and stirring gently. Rushing them or cooking over high heat would make them rubbery and dry. The tomato added brightness, acidity, and a burst of fresh flavor to the rich, creamy eggs, and the combination was light yet incredibly satisfying. While the eggs cooked, she toasted 2 slices of bread, white, wheat, or rye, and buttered them generously while they were still hot, so the butter melted into the toast. She served the scrambled eggs and tomato on a plate alongside the buttered toast, and the runny eggs soaked into the toast, making every bite flavorful and comforting. Some grandmas added a pinch of dried oregano or basil to the tomato while it cooked, which gave the dish a Mediterranean flavor. Others sprinkled fresh parsley or grated cheese on top of the eggs just before serving for extra richness. The meal was light, fresh, and incredibly satisfying, providing protein, vitamins, and carbohydrates all in one simple plate. The combination of eggs and tomatoes was popular in Mediterranean and Southern cooking, and it became a staple in American kitchens during the Depression because both ingredients were cheap and abundant. Tomatoes added vitamins, color, and flavor without adding cost, and eggs provided protein and richness. Seniors could grow tomatoes in their gardens or buy them for pennies at the market during summer, and eggs were one of the cheapest proteins available year-round. These 30-from-scratch dinners were more than just recipes. They were survival, wisdom, and love cooked into every simple meal. Our grandparents and great-grandparents who lived alone during the Depression, the war years, and the decades that followed didn't have the luxury of takeout, frozen dinners, or grocery store rotisserie chickens. They had fresh ingredients, a hot stove, a cast-iron skillet, and the knowledge passed down through generations about how to turn almost nothing into something nourishing, satisfying, and delicious. Liver and onions, beef stew, homemade chicken and rice, pan-fried pork chops, fresh vegetable soup, baked beans from scratch. Every single one of these meals told a story of resourcefulness, patience, and pride. They proved that you didn't need expensive ingredients, fancy equipment, or complicated techniques to feed yourself well. You just needed fresh food, a little time, and the skills to cook it properly. But somewhere along the way, we traded those skills for convenience. We replaced fresh vegetables with frozen bags, real butter with margarine, dried beans with canned, our homemade broth with bouillon cubes, and patient cooking with microwave meals. We forgot that the magic wasn't just in the taste, it was in the process, the satisfaction, the independence. Now, these 30 dinners have vanished from our kitchens, our tables, and our memories, and with them, we've lost a piece of our heritage and our self-reliance. But it's not too late. You can bring these meals back. You can honor the seniors who cooked alone, fed themselves well, and never complained. You can teach yourself, or someone you love, that real cooking isn't hard, it's just patient. You can be the one who says no to takeout and yes to fresh ingredients. These meals aren't just food, they're history, independence, and dignity cooked into every bite. Don't let them disappear forever. Cook one, master one, pass it on.